Hi everyone. Today I want to wrap up my series of 6 westerns from 1972, which is part of my year-long trip through the movies of that year. Um, and westerns was my first topic. I'll choose a different topic or genre each month. But this final western is ULZANA'S Raid, and this is directed by Robert Aldrich. It stars Burt Lancaster, Bruce Davison, and it is a familiar Western storyline. A band of Apaches living on a reservation, their leader being ULZANA. They escape from the reservation, they steal horses, and they now are raiding on the homesteaders. They're ultimately pursued by the cavalry, and we have some kind of stock characters here. The grizzled veteran tracker played by Burt Lancaster. His Indian sidekick, who's even a better tracker. He is an Apache. We have the by the book brass. They're not so anxious to be going out to trail ULZANA. So they send this recent West Point graduate, still wet behind his ears, played by Bruce Davison, who is eager to go out there and capture some of the glory of what he's been led to expect in his soldierly training. But this is really, as a Robert Aldrich movie, we don't get a pictorial grandeur of the Old West, and especially in ULZANA'S Raid, where we get a kind of landscape of hell. We certainly have very evocative landscapes, but this is not a John Ford movie, and in fact, it was taken as, and certainly was meant, at least in some aspects, to be a metaphor of Vietnam. 1972 was the Vietnam War era, and I think it was 69 or 70 where the My Lai massacre sort of, if there was any American innocence left from the Vietnam War, that incident certainly certainly destroyed what was left of that. So there's brutal violence in this movie. I mean, absolutely brutal violence, and much of the film is really the moral or the education of the Bruce Davison character. He's so young looking. He's only like 16 years old here. I think Last Summer was his first film, and Strawberry Statement. And he looks like he's 16. He's actually 26 here. And a lot of there's a lot of conversations going on between Davison and Burt Lancaster, and also Jorge Luke. And one in particular where Davison is wondering why are the Apaches doing this, because they're committing some very brutal atrocities, and Aldrich doesn't look away, and this Apache Indian scout describes how they need the power. They want to torture live victims because then they can capture their power, that they're out on this warpath because they have, living on the reservation, they have become emasculated. They have been they smell women, children, animals. This is not who they are meant to be, and Davison's education here is really enlightening, but also we have this, in getting back to the Vietnam metaphor and the brutal violence, and brutal violence is always in Aldrich's films. Aldrich himself was a left-wing filmmaker. I think he was a cousin of Nelson Rockefeller, the former governor and vice president of the United States. And so he came out of big wealth, but he wanted to go his own way, and he left the family fortune behind to seek his way in Hollywood as a producer, and he learned the ropes. He had a great education before he became a filmmaker himself. He wasn't blacklisted despite his left-wing views because, according to him, he came along too late. But producers generally didn't get, and he started out as both producer-director, they didn't usually get blacklisted anyways. They were seen they were part of the system, And of course, he also came from great wealth, and much of the blacklist was aimed at people who didn't, believe in capitalism to the extent that society wanted them to. And then in Vietnam, he was a very vocal opponent of the Vietnam War. But Vietnam is sort of like it's been forgotten. It's sort of entering ancient history. So when you look at ULZANA'S raid today, you might not see all these Vietnam or the tenor of the times, the mood of the times. Certainly, it plays itself out in some of the massive U.S. military might imposing its will on basically peasant civilizations in both the Apaches and in Vietnam. So as a Western, though, and even though we have these stock characters, this is just, is Robert Aldrich at his nihilistic best, I think. I mean, he was about, they call him a misogynist. He actually made quite a few films with about females. I think 4 or 5, I think, were centered on females, including Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, one of his biggest hits. But even there, you have this power struggle between 2 women. But most of Aldrich's films are power struggles between men. Characters that have to figure out who's on top, who knows the most. We're going to get another example of that, and the Criterion Collection is releasing Flight of the Phoenix, another all-male film in which we have these same kind of power clashes. So much is about the male ego and whether the male ego can the destructive power of the male ego when it runs amok, and whether people will ever learn to live together as long as this male ego, this tendency to want to dominate other people, to oppress other people, to gain power. Aldrich is not an optimist in that regard. And ULZANA'S raid this is one of Burt Lancaster. I think it's one of his best performances. We don't get the toothy smiles here. And he's just a grizzled veteran. And of course, he played an Apache with Robert Aldrich in their film, Apache. And he also made Veracruz with Aldrich. But they didn't get along together too well in the post-production of this movie. Which was written by Alan Sharp, and we learn in the commentary Alan Sharp was a really interesting character. I mean, he viewed this film as sort of like Melville. This is like The Searchers, or Melville's in Search of the White Whale, Moby Dick kind of story. Great supporting cast. We have Richard Jaco. He's always good. He was in a whole lot of Robert Aldrich movies. While they were making the film, he learned that he was nominated for an Academy Award for a Paul Newman film whose name I can't remember. I didn't write it down. Sometimes a Great Notion, which was a Ken Casey novel. And Davison is good. Jorge Luke is just fantastic as the Indian scout. The commentary mentions how so much of this movie is regarding fathers and sons. Bruce Davison's father, a preacher back in Philadelphia. But the relationship between Jorge Luke and Burt Lancaster in this film is that there's such a tight, it is another father-son relationship, and very poignant. Although everything is implicit in their performances. And then ULZANA himself is played by Joaquin Martinez. So these are Mexican actors playing the Indian roles. And he looks so familiar to me as ULZANA, and he certainly should have, because he was the Crow Indian chief in Jeremiah Johnson. Didn't have any dialogue in that one. He doesn't have any dialogue in English dialogue in this. He does have a couple lines of Apache. He was also one of Joe Kidd's ranch hands in this movie. But he has this great these are not noble savages, but he has this there's a kind of dignity to him. that was also evident in Jeremiah Johnson. And the commentary is by Tim Pinkerton, and always it's a fantastic. I mean, there's so much information, and he goes through all the cast, the supporting cast. I happen to love that. Some people don't like it. You know, I could look this up on IMDb, but he goes into great detail on all the supporting actors, and I'm a big fan of the supporting actors in all films. And you know, the relationship between Lancaster and Aldrich, both of them had production on and off production companies. Aldrich actually came up working for the Hecht Lancaster production company, and then Aldrich had a variety of different production companies of his own. They were individualists. They wanted to make their own kind of movies. They didn't want to kowtow to the suits back in Hollywood. But you needed a hit for that, and ULZANA'S Raid was not a hit, and Aldrich had a big hit with The Dirty Dozen about 5 years before, but then 3 or 4 flops in a row and you're done for in Hollywood. And Aldrich was a left-winger, but he wanted to make he didn't want to make message movies, he wanted to make populist movies that would have sort of progressive themes to them. I think he only had one more hit, and that was The Longest Yard with Burt Reynolds, and he made about 6 or 7 more movies. Some of them I think might be very interesting to try to rewatch and rediscover. Another Burt Reynolds movie called Hustle's Last Film, which was about female wrestlers. I saw it when it came out. I haven't seen it since. I can't even remember the name of it. All the Marbles was the name of that one. So. Very, very much an interesting director. Now, this, like I say, this wraps up my 6. There's the other 5. Which one do I think is the best? I don't know. I liked all these movies. I can't rank movies much anymore, but I think the most audience-friendly movie would probably be Jeremiah Johnson. A great charismatic performance by Robert Redford in that movie. There are some brutal scenes. As far as an artistic achievement, I think this is a great artistic achievement by Robert Aldrich. It's not for everybody. It's very brutal. I find it very hard to watch. This is one of the last movies that employed the trip wires on the horses, and you see a lot of horses falling. That's the one part of the movie it's hard to take. I didn't particularly care for the musical score by Frank DeVal. DeVal, I think, scored all of Robert Aldrich's movies, if I'm not mistaken. But this is, you know, as Aldrich was an auteur director, I mean, he was giving you his vision of the world. It was a dark, brutal world. You know, artistically speaking, it's a very consistent vision. So that'll about wrap up this Western segment. Next month, I'm going to work on, I'm already started working on what I think I'll call black cinema, which include movies like Lady Sings the Blues and Sounder and Superfly, and I'm working on that. So I'll do those 5 or 6 of those in about another month. So I'm going to do like a different topic of genre of the movies of 1972 going on through the 50th year anniversary of all these movies in 2022. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. You guys take care.